Got it. We're live. This is being live streamed on YouTube, and there it is. But of course, the link isn't in front of me. Just give us just a minute. We're live on Zoom, on YouTube. If you want, you can go over there and find us. All right. So, Kristen, what do you got for questions?
I'm gonna have those questions up for you in about 5 minutes. So if you can check back on GoTo.
5 minutes. That's how you do this. You,
Sorry, Kelby,
you
I got a little lost in
I
my
can make
program.
stuff up, man. I make stuff up. Okay. Here we go. Question number one. What are the most difficult things that we cannot mitigate on the living in the private? I got a great question today with a member, and I responded this way. I said, there's two basic things that we can't control, but we have tremendous success. Everybody always asks about the employment side, like, what do you do if you're an employee? And the answer that we cannot control is the relationship with between you and your HR department. So, like out here in California, they're used to seeing people that have no social security numbers, people that are what are called non-resident aliens. And so in other states, they're not. And you're going to have always a Yahoo or somebody that just doesn't know or somebody that thinks they know everything. And you got to take a moment and explain. And so I've about every once in a couple of months have to talk to a bank rep regarding how to open up the foundation account properly, which is the second thing, which I'm going to get into in a second. Or I got to talk to somebody in an HR department to just simply tell them how to structure. And even if you're going in, and there's a few different ways that you can mitigate that employment, mitigate it using your foundation, and you become a contractor, you mitigate it as a W-8 BEN, or you claim exempt on a W-4. Either way, you're exempt. Now, the things in which are the unknowns is what is the HR department going to do with state and federal taxes? Are they going to stop that? What are they going to do with social? Employment tax, different things like that. And the second thing is, how do you open up the foundation and the variables that could be there? What people do with these private foundations is, because you're tax exempt, their first mistake is they walk in a bank and say, we're exempt. We don't have to pay taxes. We don't have to. I'm like, why are you telling a bank rep that? Banks don't need to know that. You walk in, I want a business account for a private membership association. Those are the terms to which they are very familiar with, and they will be more than happy to establish an account. Now, 14 years ago, when I started opening up an account for HISadvocates, I thought the bank account had to be done in a certain form, in a certain fashion, in a certain way to make sure it was structured upright. That's not how it works. It's the fact that it's unregistered, meaning the foundation, that it's private, and the way that we do the tax ID number and the way that we serve notice to the IRS. Those are the things to which make the foundation private. And you can go get any kind of an account you want, um, so long as you don't have your social security directly on the account. And that's what a PMA does, private membership association. It's not your account. Therefore, the Social Security would either not be asked for at all, or would be on a profile to the side of the account, not directly on the account. You can always tell, how do you determine whether social's on the account or not? You call their board and you punch in your social. If it finds an account, you're associated to the account. Yes, that's probably the best way to determine that. So you want to make sure that social's not on the account. You want to make sure it's on a side profile, and that's it, if anything, or try to get them to open up the account without the social. And there's plenty of banks that'll open up the account without a social. So that's pretty much the two variables that we don't control. But what I do, the third variable is you have somebody at the United States Post Office who thinks they know how to fill out an application and they're trying to tell you that you can't submit the application right. That's the third variable that we don't control. But what I do, and it's very rare, maybe once every 3 to 5 months or whatever, I got to get on the phone. And if you look up in Black's Law, there's a term called attorney in fact. Attorney in fact. Doesn't mean I'm an attorney, but it sure sounds like I could be an attorney. It's a legal way for me to speak on behalf of an individual. That sounds powerful. That's all it is. So when you're in the bank or you're in the United States Post Office or you're in, talking to your HR department, you would say something to the effect, I had private counsel set this up and I'd be more than happy to get my attorney, in fact, on the phone. And the way that I just worded that, meaning I'd be more than happy to get my attorney, in fact, on the phone. And I would get on the phone and I would talk to the United States Post Office and I say, I get paid to counsel people. I wanted to find out how you are counseling my client um, as a non-licensed attorney. And they start freaking out. Like, and I just respectfully say, stop giving my client legal advice. We've done thousands of these. File this on demand, or we'll be more than happy to file a complaint with your supervisors at the district head, where they know these are supposed to be filed. You're not supposed to be giving legal advice to my clients. And then in about a month, 2 months, I'm going to have them come back and show you how to um, that this process of doing a passport as a state citizen actually works. So you can see that it's done the proper way. And that's pretty much it. A lot of times, I always suggest people read all your docs, man. Read all your docs, read the DS-11, read the oath of affirmation. Right there in the oath of affirmation, it gives you the ability to do an explanatory statement with the docs. We're allowed to write on the docs. We're allowed to reserve our rights on the docs. We're allowed to not put a social security on the docs. We're allowed to do the things that we do. And proof is application, passport. So those are the variables. And those are the things in which we get a little pushback. And those are the things that we have to educate on. And it's not educating in offensive ways. It's, especially with the HR department of your employer. It's education in a way that, because you can walk in with a W-8 BEN, non-resident alien, and there's no taxes taken out. And you're completely exempt, and you don't have a requirement to file a return. Why? And that'll be a next question that I pose for you guys real quick. Did you email that yet? Oh, it's up there. Okay. All right. Um, if when I have finished the living in the private, I file my final returns, but choose not to pay the amount due, and the amount owed is more than 50,000. Is there a concern about my passport being revoked by the United States? In that same scenario, if I cannot get my employer to pay my foundation and have to give them a W-8 BEN/W-4T to accept payment to me personally, is wage garnishment likely to be an issue? That's a great question. So, Doug, I can't answer questions on behalf of, an entire federal government on what they are specifically going to do or not do. There's a lot of rogue people that operate in and out of honor, and even with the laws pertaining to like what you're saying here. I have seen people, not state citizens, but I've seen people lose their passport. And there's scenarios to which we are working through with attorneys um, to rebut the presumption of jurisdiction and your Fourth Amendment right to travel. And so we're doing a lot of next level stuff. I have had people with $1 million lien IRS issues get passports. So to say something whether or not specific to you, I can't really respond with integrity. um, I would say that it would be 3 years before they would go into, in effect, a lien, number one. Number two, what people don't realize is there's a specific statute within the IRS code that before they can place any lien, and by the way, this is an important thing. If you're ever going to listen to anything I say, listen right now. A lien, and the only way to procure a lien is to file it at the Secretary of State's office. That's it. You cannot just go and take a notice of lien, which is not a lien, and file it into a county recorder and expect to have a truthful lien. And a lien is not a judgment. A judgment is a right to a trial by a jury. A lien is just imposed. Now that's number one. Number two, under IRS code, and I can't quote it right now, but I'll find it and I'll do an entire show around this because we've helped people get remove garnishments and liens because of what I'm about to say. So to answer your question, just remember what I'm about to say. The IRS code specifically requires that they show that you're a proof of an employee of the United States prior to putting a garnishment or a lien on you. And so one of the reasons why we do proof of non-employment with the United States is because that letter comes back and we now can use that to go after the officer who violated the fact that he put a lien in the county recorder, a false lien, a fake lien, and that you're not an employee of the United States and he's in violation of his own code with the IRS and to remove it within 11 days. We've had success with removing judgments, or excuse me, liens from houses and from garnishment, doing that effective method with a letter. Um, so to answer your question, I don't know, man. Would they revoke? Maybe. By that time, you're 3 or 4 years down the road, and you know what? If it were me and I had an issue with the IRS and I just wanted a clean slate and I was worried about my right to travel, I would take that BC, I would lean up on the birth certificate, and I'd walk in as a secured party creditor against the BC in bankruptcy court and bankrupt the IRS after 3 years of a filed return. You would do several things. You would become the primary creditor in many of the transactions within bankruptcy. And there's a few people that do this, and it's a pretty interesting concept. But it also allows for you to bring forth and ask for any creditor to come forward on that BC. And what happens is it makes you the beneficial interest on the BC. That's not anything that we do with the living in the private. I've been watching and experimenting and following other people doing that for years. And I don't feel like it's necessary for something we have to do. But if you really wanted to play the game with these guys, you become the primary creditor within a bankruptcy. That's a pretty interesting concept. And it really is a helpful concept, especially when it comes to receiving or not receiving a charge instrument. But now, to the second part of your question, if I cannot get my employer to pay my foundation, I have to give them a W-8B and W-4T to accept the payment to me personally. Is a wage garnishment likely to be an issue? Doubtful. Uh, Based on what I just said, if they were to put anything in a wage garnishment, we bring forward the IRS code and we make the company liable for continuing forward. We'd also make the agent liable for any notice of a lien filed because you are in fact not an employee of the United States. So likely not the garnishment. I can't tell you whether they'd stop you on a passport, but there's probably some stuff that we could do to prevent them from even getting a lien filed. So first, that lien may or may not take place. You may or may not get noticed. And then we'd immediately go after proof of non-employment, which you would already have with the LPP living in the private program. And then we'd issue that guy a warning letter to remove the lien or be personally liable based on the fact that you're not an employee of the United States. It's an important code to know. And I found it a long time ago, and I've been writing letters on it and helping people with garnishments, liens, bank garnishments, whatever. We just boom, shoot that letter off and get it dialed in. So I hope that helps. All right. So if anybody has any questions, I'm going to be looking into two areas. One here on the right on the YouTube, and No, you're right. Leslie Banks operate on the notice of lien. They did it to a lot of people, but again, you'd have to be, um, we have a letter for a bank. If anybody needs help, you'd have to get proof of non-employment with the United States done first. We do that in the living in the private, and then we give you a letter for the bank. We've had people have their social security garnished. Um, but again, the garnishment always takes place outside of the Social Security Administration, not inside the Social Security Administration. So it's done generally when it hits your account. So they'll go and attach the account. And just so you understand, the way that we do Social Security is if we have a direct deposit to the foundation account, so therefore there's no jurisdiction, and they can't hit it prior to. That's my understanding. I haven't seen it done yet. I don't know whether they can or can't, but I have not seen it done yet. So people that have a lien issue with Social Security with the IRS, just know that they have to prove that you're an employee of the United States and that a notice of a lien is not a lien, and then you go after the agent with full force. And we have a letter that does that. All right, so next question, I'm gonna pull up the Q&A. Oh, I just made it go away on accident, but I think I know the question. So, can you recommend a professional tax service while we're going through the living in the private program? The answer is I got a guy, but he's old as dirt and he doesn't take on a whole lot of customers anymore, but he knows the IRS code probably better than anybody. And he knows that he helps people with those last returns or whatever. But I don't know if he's taken on. And the reality is just getting a return filed and doing it in honor is pretty much everything. And doing that notice of final return because you've operated the office as the trustee of the trust, the BC, and you received a W-2 or a 1099, and you have to operate in honor. And so that's the filing of the return. The filing of the return allows them to set off the debt, allows them to get paid. You will, if, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I've never seen a charge instrument given to somebody who's filed a lawful return and not been able to pay. I've seen charge instruments only given to people that, get a W-2 or get a 1099 and don't file a return failure to file. I'm not saying that's going to be forever. Back in, guys, we just in this last century, we had um, I read a newspaper and we were a debtor prison state, a debtor prison country, meaning if you had debt and you couldn't pay debt, you went to jail. And I read a newspaper in 1927 from my dad's pile after he had passed, and the newspaper flat out talked about a guy owing $1.50 in rent. His rent was $2.50 for a room, and he couldn't pay it, and he ended up doing multiple days in jail for $1.50. I couldn't believe it. So we don't know what is going to be held in the future, especially as it relates to incarceration for a debtor. But this is why we do not want to be a debtor. This is why we want to be a creditor. And this is also the reason why you have opportunities and options for bankruptcy and or settlement or set off. Um, we at HISadvocates do not promote settlement or set off or discharge. Not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's not real. We just don't do that because they pluck out one out of every 50 people making attempts to do it, and ones that do it wrong because they're being misled by some guru who makes claims that are not true. And that's generally what it is. And they pick that guy out, do a charge instrument. That guy spends the next 3 years of his life trying to, get out from that negative charge. And so we don't play those games. We operate in honor. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying it's not honor. I look at those funds as blood money, and I really don't want to touch um that system or that structure. I got two hands, I got a brain, I can get out there and work and I can figure things out. And I think people believe that they're owed by the government. They have this entitlement because the government used their live born record, put it on a BC, and then monetize the BC. Well, it's their BC. You never made a proper claim against the BC. And this is why a lot of people are getting in trouble out there is they're not doing what it takes to have a private side live born record again and or to bring that BC into a probate court or bankruptcy court and become the primary creditor on it and then maybe have the opportunity for settlement and discharge. So it just is what it is. So I know I'm going a little bit exaggerated on the conversation, but um, I want safety for people. That's all. I'm gonna get to Doug's second question. When we are finished with the LPP, if I had a prior S corp that has been shut down, is there any obligation to allow an audit by the IRS for that S corp? If they were to attempt one, I'd tell them to pound sand. You know, if they want to do an audit, they can do anything they want. Audits are 100% voluntary. People don't understand, you know, just, um, everything here is voluntary. The IRS is voluntary 100%. Anybody that says the IRS is not voluntary 100% does not understand the IRS code. All you have to do is look into the IRS code for revocation of election. Revocation of election. And how do you revoke the election to pay taxes is right there in the code. And there's also code under the SSA, Social Security Administration, where you can do the same thing. And people don't know these things. So I'm not trying to, you know, you know, I don't want people to think that this is something to fear. This is something that's absolutely okay to go forward with. You know, unfortunately they're not telling people that the IRS is 100% voluntary. You know, and if you want to go to work for a company and you accept the employmentship, all these taxes are a part of the benefit of being an employee for a corporation. And everybody always thought that a corporation is the only way to do business or the only way to have or a public side entity to be able to conduct enterprise or business or create an income or compensation for yourself. And the reality is there's so many different options that are private and not public and legal and lawful and have no requirement to file a return. And that's one of the biggest things that we do at His Advocates. We've done probably 5,000 plus foundations, PMAs, churches, SSMs, unincorporated business trusts, gun trusts, whatever for people, and all of them unregistered. I've never seen one go into court, never seen one where they had jurisdiction, a garnishment, a lien. I've never seen any of that. And I'm not saying they wouldn't try someday to maybe name it. I'm just telling you, I've never seen one get audited. I've never seen any of that stuff. So know that and know that that is a part of our living in the private program that we do for people. We want to make it so that you can be private. You may not want to be an employee of a company anymore if they're going to try to hold you to a W-8 BEN or a change W-4T. You don't necessarily, like, if it were me, I would, I'm not, because everything that we do is moving you into a position of being the beneficiary of the BC and not holding that office anymore. But there's always that presumption that you're still using the social security number. Let's say you do a W-8 BEN and you don't put a social on and you're able to contract. Now they're no longer able to deduct taxes on that because there is no social on the W-8 BEN. There is no taxable ID number. Now, do they know how to operate like that? In California, yeah, they do. They'll put a bunch of ones or a bunch of zeros there, and they don't deduct taxes from that non-resident alien because there's no account to put them in. And so, but if it were me, I would not do any contracting with the name, the all caps name. Even if you are the beneficiary, I wouldn't do it. I would just leave it alone unless you did a quiet title against it and nobody came forward and you fought and you won and that was it. Then you're golden. But and until then, even if you are the beneficiary by administrative process, court of record, publicly filed, served upon them, I would still stay clear of it because it's the perception of the use, whether you're as the beneficiary or whether you're as the surety and the holding the office of the U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen, guys, and people, is the birth certificate, and it's a position, it's an office, and the statute codes and ordinances are the policy of the company. And so when you hold that office position, you're doing it one of several ways. You're doing it through the United States Post Office, through banks, through the SSA, through voters, through drivers. You basically keep using the birth certificate saying, this is my identity. And when you look up the words identity and you look up the words, it's where two or more things are operating as one. And so that word identity is a birth certificate and a man operating as one, if you will. But that birth certificate is the citizen. It's not you. But when you are in a continued operation of the office of the person, there's a perception by a district attorney. There's a perception by somebody that could be construed as whether it's true or not, and that they would have subject matter jurisdiction on a particular issue because they can prove you're holding an office, you're receiving personal mail in that name, you got a job in that name, and different things. Not saying they would do it, but there is that perception that you have to consider. This is why I want to stay away from using that name entirely. I don't want to receive mail in that name. I don't want to have a personal account in that name. I don't want to, hold a job in that name. Everything I want to do is through a created artificial entity known as a foundation that I use. And just because the social's tied to an account that's tied to HISadvocates or one of my other foundations doesn't mean I'm holding the office. Okay, there's a difference of using the social for credit purposes for my benefit than versus having a social lie on an account that is not even associated to the account. Foundation accounts are non-monetizable. They don't really like them, to be frank with you. They really can't monetize these types of accounts. This is why PayPal, you can't get a credit card for a foundation account. You can't get these things because they can't take the tax ID number and get prepaid based on that tax ID number like they do on a social security number. When you swipe a credit card, the bank is prepaid, then you pay them again. When you do a note on a house, the bank is prepaid, then paid again. Anything that you're using the all caps name and the social security, it's monetizable. It's not on a foundation. It's private. It's not public. And so those are the things in which, we know and we are trying to only use private side entities and try to like, let me say it this way. When we built the living in the private program, it was based on looking at and I think people go, Kevin, why do you always bring warrants and indictments up? And the reason is because those are the things in which we don't want to have, right? That's it. It's that simple. So if you read a warrant or an indictment, what does it say? I saw such and such person out in front of such and such address checking personal mail. I literally read that on an indictment. I went down to the United States Post Office, such and such person um, was verified by the Postmaster General that they received personal mail at such and such address. Okay. And I went down to the DMV and such person has two motor vehicles registered in his name at such and such address. 3 contract rule, in personam, subject matter, granted jurisdiction, boom, boom, boom. Indictment, warrant. Blitz the house, take your phones, take your cars, take everything they can gain as much information as they can, and then file an indictment, whatever, later. So we're looking at the way that the United States, which is exclusive jurisdiction in the District of Columbia, we're looking at the way that they gain jurisdiction over a state citizen. And so people, this is why I say what I say out there, you can't just be a American national, which has no Supreme Court support for you guys at all anywhere that says an American national or state national is of any value. You're actually making, by saying this and doing new passports and all these things as American nationals, state nationals, you're basically making allegiance to being a part of the District of Columbia again, or one of the territories that they own. And the continental states, which are the people, are not territory of the United States. And I've done proof on this on other videos, but my point I'm trying to make is, um, like when we are, when we developed the living in the private, it was to take the extremes of what is happening to the people. And we have to go through an entire process. Passport, it's Department of State. It's a state of being. It's the first place you go to correct the identity and your position with the United States of America and get identification. So we submit passport application as a state citizen. They send a passport after a few, rebuttals. We get a passport issued by the Department of State of the United States of America, where you can travel anywhere that the United States of America passport can travel. Now, what's left to do? You think you're done? Oh, you file an affidavit and you put it in the public and you're done? No, no, that's not how it works. You have existing adhesion trust. Now, I coined those words probably 4 or 5 years ago. Um, you have the drivers, the social, the IRS, you have all these things. You have to decontract, uncontract, or restructure your contract to be in the private. And so the whole living in the private program gives you the instrument to be able to do business, quote unquote, I don't like that word, in the private, where you don't have to file a return with the IRS personally or through your foundation, and be able to know that you have solidified a position with the Department of State as a state citizen. And then you still got to restructure your agreements with the DMV, the voters, the SSA, the IRS. And then you got to come into and behind and create the court of record. And that's the act of state. And then we serve constructive notice with our fee schedules. We want to help you if you need our help with anything. As a sheriff, you're getting this notice because you're the sheriff of my county. I just want to tell you, not a sovereign citizen. I'm a state citizen. We give them some things to consider, and we want to be there for them and help them. And we want to be a lawful citizen of the great nation of the United States of America. Boom, 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 boom. We're not trying to offend. We're not growing our beards long and living up in the mountains and having a driver's license burning party. I know you guys hear me say that for years. This is just us being state citizens where the law supports our ability to do that. The Supreme Court's determined this, hundreds and hundreds of cases. This isn't something we're off the cuff trying to figure out. This is something we've been doing now for 14 years. So just know that when we're talking warrants and indictments, it's not because they're happening. It's because we reverse engineered, just like they did the UFOs. We reverse engineered warrants and indictments, and then we created a program around that. Well, okay, they gain access if you're checking personal mail and you're receiving personal mail using the office of the person, the name that they own, which is on your BC, your all caps name. Okay, so stop using it, stop getting mail in that name. Change all your accounts into receiving mail in the name of the foundation. Don't receive mail at the house anymore. Pull the mailbox out, send it back. Receive mail at the United States Post Office and some other name, some other entity name. There's no contract between you and the United States Post Office. It's just you getting mail in the name of a private foundation at the post office, and everybody, including all agencies, have to mail you in care of the foundation name. If they don't, you bounce that mail back, return to sender, no such person exists. Why? Jurisdiction 101. So everything that we do, as silly as that sounds, is designed around those instruments that we don't want to have fall into our lap. Now, I'm not talking to you criminals out there. I hope you get busted for violating somebody's rights, for raping, for murdering, for whatever that you think you were allowed to do. You will be busted. This doesn't help you in those regards. You still are under God's law, and many of things that are under God's law are still under the statutes of man to bring judgment. They will just do it by a trial, by a jury of your peers, and it will be done differently. It's not going to be the same type of scenario that you would have. So if you're trying to be a state citizen to be a criminal, we're not going to help you, and that's the bottom line. There's a bigger responsibility as a citizen of the greatest nation in the world, of your state and of the United States of America, than there ever will be as a citizen of the United States. We have a responsibility to honor our fellow man, and to not hurt them, to not go after their wife, to not steal their stuff, and to operate in honor. And that's really what we are, the people, one people under God, where He is King and where we are self-governed. And that's a big responsibility, and you will pay a dramatic price if you think that you're going to get around God's law when it comes to being a state citizen. So just FYI. So how do we plan, schedule the problem bank application we now have? Um, I don't know if I told you, Mark, but it's simply let us know when you're going in. You're going to simply use the words attorney in fact. I'm going to have my attorney in fact get on the phone with us so we can explain some stuff to you pertaining to opening up the accounts. Just let us know a time, and we have I have a personal phone number that we can give you that you will call that day. I will look for that number at that time. I'll put it on my calendar and answer the phone. That's all. What is the best defense for a debt collector suit? The claim is based on an account stated. Thanks. Um, Jonathan, the best defense for there's we don't really deal with that. I have letters that are pretty ironclad. If you remember the living in the private, I'll give them to you for free and you can send them off. They're pretty powerful. 90% of the time it blows them out of the water if they're truly a debt collector. Um, But the best place that I have found that helps people is, I think they're called whatliesinmydebt.org or .com, whatliesinmydebt.com. So check them out. But the living in the private program is the best defense for debt collectors. They can't touch anything that the living in the private program is probably bulletproofing you on steroids. So if you ended up with judgments, they would not be collectible on you if you went through the living in the private program. Just 2 cents. Is it possible to be a state citizen while working in a state or federal government facility? That's a common question. We have both federal and state employees, agents that do in fact continue their relationship with the government. What they normally would do is switch it to a contractor basis and work with the federal, with the foundation to be paid. Um, if you, I do want to say that you are not working for them. I know that you are performing a job function and doing a physical activity. The contract literally is with the birth certificate. Um, in law, a corporation cannot do business with a living man or woman. That's just the facts of the law. They can only do business with like entities, and therefore the reason for the artificial person known as the birth certificate. So, on that note, if done properly, there is the ability to be a state citizen. However, if there's issues with security clearances, you're going to have to address that. And sometimes people are doing their paperwork and they're not going, the security clearance isn't being basically noticed of the filing of state citizenship paperwork necessarily. But there are people that have screwed up and said, I'm an American national, I'm this, I'm that, or I'm the other, and made proclamations within reference to their security clearance, and their security clearance was in fact revoked. And we had to undo some of those things so that they can continue their job function. This is why we're not sitting there trying to be a quote unquote sovereign citizen, American national. There are things that we can do that are right and righteous that will allow for continued employment. But understand something, when you work directly for the federal or state facilities, they're not going to stop deducting um, federal income or state income taxes from you because you are, in fact, an employee of the United States holding that office. Um, there is a way to be a state citizen and be an employee of the United States, and that's just simply in the way that you structure up any application, any renewal, and how you do the notice once you finally come out. And who do you do it to? And so if if it were me, I would sidebar and ask for further help. Maybe do a consultation to where we can discuss it one-on-one and just have an ironclad conversation that protects you. And who do you make notices to and those different things as you're going out? But please understand, you really don't want to be an employee at all for the United States. I know that there's millions of people that are, like 70 million people, I guess. It's the largest employer in the world. Um, but you're supporting a system and structure to which you are called to come out of. And anybody that is supporting that system or structure, in my opinion, especially being that continued taxes would take place, you would be in a position of dishonor with God. That's just my opinion. Now, there's a lot of pastors that would come unglued at that statement because they feel that you are required to pay taxes as a good U.S. citizen. And I don't think they understand who we are in this nation. I don't think they understand that there is a United States or a United versus the United States of America. I don't think they understand Romans 13 or 2 Peter 2:13. But I want to help people as his advocates operate in honor. And the biggest portion of that is your allegiance. The second biggest portion is not paying a single tithe to the poor. And that's what taxes are. It's a tithe. You're basically making an offering, and they're able to utilize those funds to do the dastardly work that they are doing around the world. Again, it's now the 23rd year after 9/11, the first 2.3 trillion missing in 1 year under Donald Rumsfeld, um, unaccounted for to this day. Now we are up to 38 trillion in black ops accounts where we cannot get an accounting for. And we do know that this world is being ripped apart in a lot of different respects. And we do know that there's a lot of things going on to fund a lot of things that you and I don't agree with. So the more money you're putting in, the more in dishonor I believe that the people are. And people maybe not want to hear that, but it's like, do you know of any other La Cosa Nostra that can hold a stick to what the United States government has done or is doing to people? I don't. And I'm not trying to be out on a hill announcing this. I think everybody knows this already. I think once they touted forced things when they weren't even approved, I think is proof that your interest is not in their heart. I think the wide open borders is proof that your interest is not in their heart. I think the forced things going on across the world and the wars that are taking place is proof that their interest is not in your heart. Your dollars are going out and overseas and they're bribing and paying off. And it is a gross, gross handling of a quote unquote structure that is being dismantled as we speak. So you do not want to have a part of it. Great question. There are things that we could do to help you out to structure. If it were me, I'd go through the foundation exclusively, restructure your agreements to be a private contractor and try to make that happen as much as you can. How would you hire and pay people to work for you when most people expect the boss owner to take out taxes, Social Security, et cetera? Sonny, that's not my problem. You know, I agree. We have large companies that have a lot of employees that don't care. I'm going to tell you right now, Sonny, most people are not going to be able to get a home. So the element of getting taxes taken out so you can apply for credit and get a home in a couple of years, it's ridiculous. It's not going to happen for most people. The element of getting a car can be done anywhere with a job, just proof of job, paycheck stubs, whatever. So if I can prove an income going into an account, I can buy a car. Sonny, until 30 years ago, credit scores were meaningless. We lived 6,000 years without worrying about credit. You know what I'm saying? And so I personally have not used the Social Security since 2008. Why would I go into debt? Why would I have a credit card? Why would I need to? And if you're living a biblical lifestyle, you're not operating in debt. None of that stuff matters anyway, you know. I agree with you. Some people feel no matter what, they need to use their social and they need to be paid and get a paycheck stub. I just tell them I can't. I'm not that type of entity. We're a private foundation. You're a private worker. Here's our contract. And I can pay you any which way you want. You want direct deposit, you want this, but I am not an employer to you. You're going to work these hours. Here's our agreement, and that's it. No private workers agreement is sufficient enough to allow for people to work for you. Now, what are they going to say? I want to be able to buy a house. Good luck. Okay, they're not going to be able to buy a house on $25 an hour anywhere in this country. Um, with taxes taken out, or even $50 an hour, whatever it is. They're not going to be able to in the next several years. Even with the markets crashing, there will not be loans available. I don't know if you remember the 2008 crash. Loans went away for 8 months. And then for the next 2 years, the only loans that were given out were paper loans and to 770 FICO borrowers. And they had to be tight, and their debt to income ratios had to be tight in their income statements. But the houses then in 2008 were not even half, like they've almost doubled in the value in the last 12 years, 14 years. So markets crashed. We lost 50%. It came back to normal about 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, depending on the county of the state. Now the houses have doubled since then. You're not going to be able to get a house unless you take over somebody's existing note that's in a failed environment, which the living in the private members will get a copy of contracts and how to do that. And as a licensed real estate broker with plenty of knowledge on how to do that and have done it before, you can take over somebody's existing property where you get power of attorney over the note, you catch them up on the note, and you can walk in and own that house and put it in the name of the foundation and operating in any which way that you wish. So find people that don't want or don't worry about having taxes pulled out of their accounts. That's the only way I can say it. And more people need to get into that mindset of operating in that fashion. I do understand that they're, even if they were to report you, that the EDD, the IRS, nobody has jurisdiction over a foundation. And by the way, the Constitution is clear. A man's or a woman's right to private contract is the highest form of law on this land. They don't have jurisdiction over the foundation. They don't have jurisdiction over the agreement, and you don't have a right to take taxes out because you have no accounts or structures or anything set up to do so. So you just pay them directly. You're operating in honor, they're operating in honor, and you will go on for years. And they will ultimately thank you down the road for saving them tens of thousands of dollars. We got plenty of time. I'm not jumping off at 5 o'clock or anything. We got, I think, 9 questions over in the queue and a few questions over on YouTube. Just give me a minute. We'll get to them all. Promise you. We're about to send in our final return notice, then the active state. My 15-year-old daughter, also part of Yale, living in a private with us once her driving permit. All the paperwork, rope me and rope her back into a contract, and they want an affidavit of residency. Yeah, that's jurisdiction 101, baby. Can we put our family member's address? But are there other options? Tyler, what I would do is teach your child how to do a reservation of rights by signing non-assumption on the DMV. Number one, same thing with the affidavit of residency, which technically is not a signature. It means she did not or he did not undertake. So the question is this roping your daughter back into jurisdiction of the United States? And from a color of law standpoint, it does, but from a factual basis standpoint, operating in a court, getting questioned about whether or not you actually signed that and they have subject matter jurisdiction over you is a whole nother question. So why we do what we do is so that we can protect our kids and protect jurisdiction over them. And so teach them how to sign to where there is no jurisdiction over them. And then we'll teach them how to operate in a court position where there is no jurisdiction over that particular application because you did not, in fact, agree to the terms of the application, agree to being a United States citizen, a tax person, all these things. And so your daughter's going to eventually have to, your son is going to eventually have to understand the ins and outs potentially if something were to happen and they truly wanted to live out state citizenship, they might have to address this someday, sometime. I'm going to tell you, under Title 18, it is clear that you do not need a driver's license to drive on these highways and byways. You just do not. The law is clear. Now, do they teach law enforcement that? And do you want your kids to go through that? So the answer is no. So have him sign, not a subset on the driver's permit, license, and proof of residency. And then even after all of that's done and the license is issued, we have a letter once they've gone through the living and the private that we can notice them of that we are in fact a citizen of the great state of California, and that if there's any implied terms of jurisdiction due to the element of the word residency, it's hereby denied. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do post to annex it, ANNEX that to, meaning that mailing to the original application and to have them put it in file. They're not going to know what to do with it. You're just saying you're a proud American and citizen of California and the great nation of the United States of America, and that you're, which is different than the United States. And then you ask them to put this with the original application just to dot an I across a T, what have you. So those are the only way, that is the only way if you want to hang on to a license to be able to protect you, yourself, or your children. That is the only way. There is no other real way. I know there's people that talk about all kinds of things out there. I just don't want to contract with them. So I'm not going to do an implied contract. I'm going to do a no contract. I did not undertake. If you happen to issue me the card, I'm going to accept the card, keep it in my wallet for the BC. And if I ever get pulled over, I'm going to show them license, registration, proof of insurance, and I'm going to be on my merry way. And I'm going to call 1-800-tickets and have them go down for 99 bucks and beat that clown in court. I'm not going to argue with them on the side of the road about why I do not have a license. And I'm not going to argue at I'm just going to get in and out and stop wasting my time with sovereign citizen tactics of spending 14 hours to rebut the presumption of jurisdiction because I have a canceled driver's license when you haven't handled the fact that you agreed to that term of being a resident and a citizen of the United States on the original contract. Just because it's suspended or canceled does not mean you've done away with the agreement. It's still an active agreement from a jurisdictional position standpoint for the state to prove subject matter jurisdiction. And so that's how they get sovereign citizens, because they got one foot in, one foot out. They're not dealing with all their contracts. And so you really want to either not get it at all, but every kid is like looking at that like it's gold. I hear you. So I just teach them to sign on a subset and bear that burden. It's not a big burden. It's pretty easy. And once you're through it and they have a license, you know that there's no contract in place and there's a safety provision at the very minimum. Okay, hold on a sec. My son does not have a DL and hit an elk while traveling in my truck that is registered. This is in on Idaho, and the state police gave my ticket. Thoughts? Um, I don't know what the ticket's for, but I have a guy you can call. You need to get it responded to fast. How old was the ticket written? How long ago? Kelby, have you ever heard of private banking? I have. Infinite banking, private banking. Uh, and if you're talking about the whole life policy, or are you talking about well, bottom line, it's pretty much all the same through insurance companies and loaning yourself money versus all for tax strategies, tax savings. And correct me if I'm wrong. There's really not a need for that when you have a foundation that is completely tax exempt, where you can keep money and just pay for things through the foundation. Everybody wants to get real tricky because they have to. They're operating in the office of the person. They got tax liabilities and tax issues. So I first and foremost, I agree with life insurance. I think it's something that the spouse should have upon the death of an individual. But at the same time, it's jurisdiction 101. You know, life insurance policies, um, if done right, can be very, from a tax strategy standpoint, very, very beneficial for a United States citizen. I don't personally see that need whatsoever as a state citizen. I'm not operating in debt and anything that I want. I use a card or send cash or make a trade. There's not a need for me to have that. If I'm not answering your question properly, meaning I don't have a need to do the whole life policy, cash up the policy. And you got to remember, when you're cashing up those policies, you can only cash them up so high, because if the policy cash amount is higher than the life insurance limit or the life insurance benefit, you trigger, I think it's called an MOC, where they do an automatic purchase of more life insurance. And so you're always going to have a cost of life insurance. You're always going to have that benefit triggered for your spouse upon your death, but you're going to also have the benefit of being able to loan yourself money through those policies. But as a state citizen, there really isn't a need, because number one, you don't file a tax return, so there's not need for a personal benefit of a tax strategy or tax savings or a tax deduction or you know, and all these people are trying to figure out, like Elon Musk. Uh he didn't pay himself a salary. He was actually pretty smart. When his Tesla stock started rising up, he went down to the bank and got a loan against the value of his stock. And so in a loan, there's no income whatsoever. And that's the same principle that people are trying to do with these policies. So why not just operate everything through the foundation, which has no taxable liability whatsoever, no liability to file a return whatsoever. And so anything that comes in is 100% uh, above reproach, outside of their jurisdiction, and yours to spend. So there's really not, the life insurance guys are important. But when it comes to saving you from having a taxable event because you're getting a loan versus getting income, it's not necessary when you're out of the system. Um, but again, if you can get a whole life policy and get yourself in a position where you're protecting your family, or a term policy where you're protecting your family, or a whole life policy that pays for the premium and the benefit for the term of the policy, or until you die. I think that's very advantageous and very smart for people. But you got to watch the jurisdiction on the application when you're submitting for the policy. One of my children's turning 16 soon. They are not a state citizen, but they still sign as non-assumption on the signature line when they're filling out the DL paper? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would. There's no reason. Once we have broken all self-created adhesion agreements with the Fed Corp, what is going on? Meanwhile, with the registered trust in our all caps name, or do we take control of the trust if we move it from an implied or to expressed before we break free? I hope this makes sense. There's no need. You're free once you've gone through the living in the private program, the element of the BC, and doing the moving it from the implied to the expressed, so that you're holding it as beneficiary. Um, I I personally don't have enough experience in that subject matter to make a determination if it's helpful or not. I do know that there's many people that are doing elements of um, being taking the BC into probate and doing a quiet title action. I do know that there's elements of people taking the BC into bankruptcy court, becoming the primary creditor on, and taking control of the BC in that fashion. Um, but it doesn't make a difference, Cindy, whether you do that, because your freedom is expressed here on the private side, with the Department of State, sealed with the court of record through the active state and constructive notice, and the fee schedule warning is noticed to them, which is why the His Advocates members get left alone. And so I don't think it's necessary, but I'd be interested to take a look at whatever you're trying to figure out and try to help you out. I'm interested to know what you would say to a law enforcement agent as a state citizen if you were to get pulled over in an unregistered vehicle but have the MSO. I have asked questions in the past about having an unregistered vehicle and having the answer usually surrounded by the fact that the police are uneducated and to be prepared for issues unless you can explain things correctly to them. So again, my question, how do you explain to them that you are within your rights to move freely in a vehicle that is unregistered? Is there a script that can be basically implemented in these situations? So a lot of times what people are doing, and I don't have this issue, so what you're about to get rendered is successful communications that I've seen out there between parties and law enforcement. Law enforcement generally takes a very proactive. Now, guys, got to understand, you can't be angry at the cops. I know that there are bad cops out there, but you can't be angry at them. They're being told by the FBI that there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. They've made this term up to make fun of people that are trying to become state citizens. They're not going to tell law enforcement that the United States Code, that the Supreme Court, that everything out there has already ruled in the favor of a driver, meaning a person and their ability to operate a motor vehicle, a licensed motor vehicle, or an unregistered, unlicensed motor vehicle with an MSO. There is no law to support the forced registration of an MSO. There's no law to support a forced ticket of somebody who is driving without a license, period. So if it were me, um, and quite frankly, I'd be as nice as possible and I'd hand him a packet. I'd say, read that packet, call your drill sergeant, whoever, get him out ASAP. I'm not rolling that window down beyond that. And if they ask any questions, I just simply say, I'm not answering questions. Am I free to go? Then they're going to maybe get to the point where they're asking permission to break your window, or they're going to hand you your paperwork back and say, you may go. I've seen them both. And it's because they are power hungry. They don't know the law. They don't care about the law, and they are operating in dishonor. Then I've seen cops say, let him go, let him go, because many people presented the right paperwork with what they're saying to the law enforcement department. But I wouldn't even attempt to do that. I would have paper issued to them on the spot with the warning. and I wouldn't roll down that window and I wouldn't open your door. And, and I would very much operate within respect to their position, knowing that they are uneducated in this manner. They have been educated in the wrong way about, state citizens and their right to travel. But guys, I'm going to tell you, there are people out there who've made documents and they look really powerful. And it describes the code in the United States and it describes the Supreme Court rulings. And if you have, you're hereby on, if you've gone through the living in the private program right there um in your fee schedule that you've filed into the public, you hand them a copy of your docs, you hand them a copy of that fee schedule, and you say for you're on line item number 14, and for every minute you're holding me beyond this point, this is a registered document with the Department of State with and serve notice to your sheriff and to the local county board of supervisors. And for every moment I'm here, it's costing you X, and you personally, because you've been warned that this is in violation of da 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 da, whatever. But you got to understand something. You need to have papers that clearly define this. Let them read it and do not get out of that vehicle. If they're going to bust that vehicle, they're going to bust it anyway. But honestly, what they do is kind of hilarious. They say, "I'm going to break this window. You understand?" And you go, "Yeah," and then they break the window. It's crazy how people are stupid. I seen one guy, they said, "I'm going to break the window." He said, "No, you're not." Put his head right up on that window. "No, you're not. Do not break my window. You don't have my consent. You do not have my permission to break the window." And I've seen cops break the front windshield and they violate every single right and they lose later. You're not always going to win on the side of the road. Your best expectation is to try to um, skedaddle and take the ticket or take whatever they're going to give you and be very respectful to them. Get out of there and fight it later. Um, do not take the blows. Do not take the heat. And I know a lot of people, but you have to have your documents in order. Like I have one guy. He's a whale, man. He's completely out, and he handed him the passport. He has the MSO in the truck. They couldn't take the truck. They let the wife drive the truck away. There is no registration on the truck. They arrested him for not having failure to ID. He gave them a passport. Failure to ID. He completely won his case later. It was completely done. But the bottom line is, he spent 3 days in jail. And because they lied, failure to ID, no, he ID'd. So they lied. And now it's up to him if he wanted to do a suit and all these things. And the bottom line is he spent 3 days in jail. His wife's freaking out. And I'm like, stop. He's 6'6". He's 300 pounds. He's fine. He's taking a vacation. He's good to go. He needs time off, and we were laughing about it. But that was an officer who completely violated the rights of the individual. So let me just say it. So what if your paperwork is perfect and you have the scariest looking paperwork in the world and you have a guy with a complete and total attitude, and are you going to be able to get around that stuff? No, but if you serve them appropriately up front and you document it and you got it on video, and this is very important, guys, you need to have one of those dash cams that are videoing out that left side like I got of the window of the vehicles. They need to be able to see that you're recording them. You want to be live with them on YouTube or recording them live right there on your phone. You let them know you're recording here, you're recording here. And you hand them your paperwork, a package you're never going to get back. You don't want it back, or if you get it back, you're going to be lucky. But let them read and say, "I want you to understand." And then they're going to say, "Well, I don't give a crap about this. I know you don't, but I want you to remember, I am not a sovereign citizen." Right there on the front gives you the title that allows me to drive without a driver's license in my wallet. And there is no jurisdiction over this vehicle. Look under the Supreme Court ruling, da 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 da, right there. And if you touch me or you touch this vehicle, I will own your ass. Look on page 4, boom, boom, boom. And for every minute I'm here. And I would just basically be very respectful and help them line item with them what you're willing to do to them. if they do not let you go. But that's you driving without a license, that's you operating an MSO, and you're taking a very proactive approach, and you're not going to cave to their needs to get you out of that vehicle. You get out of that vehicle, you're toast. Um, and I would not let them break your window. I would have a sergeant come out, I'd have it all on video, and you're going to win no matter what later, because you have the right to drive without a driver's license. You have the right to drive an unregistered vehicle that is MSO'd in your pocket. There is no requirement to have a motor or have a car or a truck registered with the state. They cannot take your title away from you. It's all the threat of duress and coercion against the individuals that make people do this. And so if you are able to convey those things and show them the Supreme Court rulings up front and put enough fear into them and show them that you're not scared of them, that's really what happens, because it's the guys that are out there online on YouTube that are able to convince them that they will lose everything they have personally if they come after you or violate your rights, that they will lose everything. It's those guys that are standing up to tyranny and telling them to shut up, and they're literally, and I don't say to do this, calling them pigs. Shut up, pig. Am I free to go? Yeah, back off, pig. And I'm like, dude, why are you talking to him like that, man? I don't care how well you know your words, how well you know your stuff. Don't disrespect people like that. Work with these guys. Let's train them up over time. Let them see enough of us that we believe what we believe, and we're operating in the law. We're not operating outside of the law. And let's file enough suits to show these guys we're being serious. And after a while, they're going to leave you alone. They're going to understand that there's enough people out there doing this that do not want and are not represented as somebody that they have jurisdiction over. They have been lied to by the feds. They are continuing to be lied to by the feds. Um, there's a few different places on our website, hisadvocates.org, where I've seen documents that help people in this regard tremendously. That coupled with paperwork, and you don't want to talk to them. I know you want to be able to say things to them, but let your paperwork speak. Your paperwork is more important than you speaking, and you don't answer questions. You make statements, and that's it. Any questions that they have, I don't answer questions. I'm sorry. And then you ask questions, and it's very important that we remain in control and respect. Um, and there are scripts. I've seen all kinds of different things. Some of the best guys out there. Uh, have written scripts and they show different things, but your remedy is not on the streets. Your remedy is in court if they're going to continue to press forward on that. Just FYI. In response to the letter we mailed to the United States Office of Personal Management requesting my employment since I was 15 or 16, what is the purpose of having that information? How does that help us being an American? So, Zindy, going back to what I was saying about requesting a letter from the United States asking them for proof of non-employment, what they do is they send a letter back saying you were not employed by the United States, or send something to that effect back. And that's your proof now. If you ever have any IRS issues, or if you ever have any jurisdictional issues, or if you ever have any lien issues or garnishment issues, or because to have a garnishment, to have a lien, or any of these things, you would have to be proven that you're a citizen, or excuse me, an employee of the United States. So that's why we do that, because we help people that do have liens, do have garnishments, liens on houses, different things like that to get out of that lien. It very much works. You have a felony, can you still do a gun trust, purchase a gun through the trust? So the answer is actually yes. There is a case called Bond versus the United States from 2003 where a guy who had a felony was violated for owning a gun. He went to the Supreme Court and won. The Constitution and his right to have a gun was more important than the parole agreements that he had structured up with the state or the Fed or whoever it was. So look at that case and understand that you have to go to your final agreement that you have with the state. Like, what was the requirement? Are you not allowed to have guns? Are you not allowed to whatever? What are those requirements? Purchase guns. Because a purchase of a gun in the private through a gun trust, you're technically not an owner and you're in possession on behalf of a trust. So, you know, you can do whatever you want to do, but during a position of parole, they have jurisdiction over the house, over your cars, over all those things. So I wouldn't do that. But if it were me and I was past parole and past the opportunity of being violated, I would remove the agreement in writing with the state that I agreed to anything about a gun whatsoever. And I would put it into the public, create the new agreement through an administrative process to remove my signature from that parole agreement because it violates my constitutional rights. And I would name the case Bond versus the United States. And so now, because they didn't tell you that even as a felon you have a right to access a gun, and the Supreme Court has already determined that, you're removing your signature from that agreement for fraud in the factum. Notice of non-response with an opportunity to cure, notice of judgment, basically. And so that's what I would do. And if you really want a gun, you have to deal with the contract still, which is that final parole agreement and or state agreement that you have in place. What about having Medicaid or receiving SNAP food stamps program? It's government assistance. I'm due to renew before February 10th. Would I stop to go private? Teresa, so everything that I say to people, I'm always looking at the worst case scenarios. Like I'm telling people, if it were me and I didn't, and I'm a public figure and going against the grain of what these guys are trying to promote out there, I'm completely against the grain. I'm completely against them, completely stripping, everybody away from them. So I have to think in the worst case scenarios. I have to think of how can they gain subject matter jurisdiction over Teresa? And I would have to say my obvious or clear or better answer for you to avoid an indictment because you're a bad girl and you may get in trouble. I'd have to say steer clear from anything like that. But I get it, man. There's ways of doing those agreements where you retain your rights and where you retain control of the agreement so that you're not giving over an implied jurisdiction, position, etc., signing non-assumptive, doing all rights reserved, changing the forms of the paperwork to be private. There are ways to do those agreements and stay private. I would consider thinking that through. If you're going to out, come out. Try to completely remove yourself. I get it. It's tough financially, but there are ways to continue that support because it's really truly not you getting the benefit. It's your birth certificate, but it is showing that you're holding an office. But now you've done a full reservation, you've done a full non-assumptive signature. That means if they were to go after and look at those agreements to try to bring about subject matter jurisdiction, you could literally say under oath that you never signed that. Now, did you use the benefits? Absolutely. And so, how do you get a judge to show or agree with you, and or it doesn't matter whether they agree with you, to help them understand that you never signed that, and that well, we're just going to say that you did in fact sign it, because he's going to say, oh, did you put pen to paper? And you're going to say, well, I put pen to paper, but I did not sign it. I actually hand wrote the words non-assumptive because I did not want agreement with the state. but needed the benefit. And so the bottom line is that's the worst case scenario is if you're in front of a judge and you're trying to prove that there's no subject matter jurisdiction over a charge instrument that they're trying to file against you for whatever. Um, and I'm looking at the worst case scenarios where, I'm trying to help you not have that charge instrument where you didn't hurt anybody and they're just trying to be mean or whatever with you. And so I don't want you to have to go through that. So I think of the worst case scenarios and why you should maybe do that. And if you're going to do it, you do it with the full reservations. And then I try to teach you that quasi conversation with the judge and da 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 da. The bottom line is you can have it, but you need to make sure the contract is done appropriately. So if the all caps name is on that agreement, you're putting the word by in front of your signature, showing that you're the representation, the party, the president of the corporation always puts the word by in front of his name because he's the representation, not the actual party. He's representing the instrument on the agreement. And so it's the same thing. Put the word by, sign not a subset, or sign your name, put the words not a subset underneath your signature. There's a lot of different ways to get that done to where you can still receive the benefits. Okay, is the deal with C and B finalized, Caleb and Brown, so we can open up the counter foundation? I thought it was done weeks ago. I think you're golden. Just reach out to back office and ask for help on it. I think we're golden. What he was asking is, do we have when people are going through or living in the private or people want to purchase crypto? Let me just record this real quick. If people are wanting to purchase crypto and we're about to have a massive gain, and I'm going to do a show on this this week. We're about to have a massive gain and go through a cycle this year. Next year is probably going to be more 2025 than this year. Um, and what you're going to see is massive gains in crypto. And if you use our services and you don't want to be a state citizen, you can still purchase a private foundation and we'll give you the relationship with our guys in Australia, Caleb and Brown. We have a special relationship. You cannot go to them directly. You have to go through us. And the reason why I say that is it's taken us 3 years for them to accept the form of structure that we have in the foundations so that people can get approved and start purchasing crypto through the foundation. And what we will show you is how not only can you purchase it, but how you can have all your stuff go to a hard wallet that you purchase through your foundation. So everything is owned by the foundation, an untaxable entity. And so when those big gains come through, you're going to be sending crypto to Caleb or one of your exchange accounts that you have in the name of the foundation, cashing it, converting it to USD or Fed coin or whatever it is, and then moving that to your bank locally where you can spend that cash. It's pretty genius. But this is something everybody in the living in the private program is able to do. So this is a huge conversation that really nobody's having. Nobody's really talking through of how to get the gains in crypto without paying the IRS. But the other thing that a foundation does, the other thing a foundation does is all you private business owners out there with LLCs and S corps and this new requirement to make sure that you have your filings done and done right, or you're going to have a penalty of $500 per day. Why don't you come into the private and not have to file a return at all and do business in the private and have everything you have right now just on steroids? And that's something really to consider as a business owner, because people, you're about to get crushed if you have a public side S or a C and you don't have your ducks in a row. And if you are sick of the IRS and you're sick of the federal government trying to close you down during an operation that is something we went through in the past where they were shutting companies down. The only ones that were staying open were private, unincorporated ones, and where they have no jurisdiction. That's why you want to be private and not public. Will the state be willing to deliver your license to your foundation name when they mail it? It's an excellent question. I don't know. And I wouldn't worry about jurisdiction being implied because of that. Um, there's the element of redoing the holding the office of the person. Um, once okay, so when we first start to living in the private, one of the things that we do for people is we write a letter for them that they mail to the United States Post Office, the local guy, the postmaster general. And we tell them we're removing ourselves from holding the office of the person and do not send personal mail to such and such address ever again. And so at the end of living in the private, because there's a lot of changes that need to be done, and the most work that needs to happen is addressing all the vendors, all the public franchises of the United States government, that anything that you're receiving needs to be in the name of the foundation. So if it were me, I would open the envelope, pull the license out, close it, seal it, return it to sender with no such person exists at this address, and have the license in your wallet. It'd be hilarious. That's what I do on anything that comes into my name. I have a stamp. It's right here. I have one here and one in my office where I return it to sender, no such person exists at this address, and I just move on. So that's what I would do if I were you guys. I wouldn't allow for implied jurisdiction, but you can have them mail it to your foundation. I doubt they will, though. Thanks, Dave. That ticket was for operating a vehicle without a class C or let's see, it was that one thing. I'll check it out. Can the foundation take a credit card payment? What do you mean by that, Sonny? Make a credit card payment? Is that what you mean? Or donations? Oh yeah. Oh, I understand what you're saying. So foundation is no different than a 501c3. If somebody makes a payment to us, and they want a receipt so they can take a tax deduction, they get 100% of the LPP deduction costs. I don't recommend it, but you can. Secondly, we have merchant accounts as a ministry, as a SSM, and or foundation or unincorporated business trust or PMA, all these private style entities, private trusts, they can all have credit card merchant accounts in the private with no socials attached and be able to um, take credit card payments. So absolutely. And a donation, same way. Um, it is in fact tax deductible. Unfortunately, like a lot of times people are trying to do these big donations. They only want to do it to a 501c3 church. And so there's some things that you can do if you're trying to raise capital or some structure that you can do utilizing a 501c3. But I would just convince them that the private foundation is sufficient to be able to give a donation receipt to and allow for them to take the deduction because the IRS will honor it. I have stock in a S corp. The law 1361C clearly states the corporation cannot have a non-resident alien as a stockholder. Is there a way to keep my stock as a state of the union citizen? First and foremost, John, the stock is issued to the registered organization, the U.S. citizen. It's not issued to you. Number two, you're not a non-resident alien. That is a code within the IRS to make jurisdictional position sometimes that we utilize to your favor. Number three, as a state citizen, if it were me, I'd have all stock issued to a foundation, which is private, not public, and that foundation can own any stock, and any entity can purchase stock, can have an exchange account, can have a stock trade account, can have a bank account, can hold a house on a deed, can hold a car in its name, can have insurance, you name it. So if it were me, I'd put the stock in the name of the foundation and to hold it and be private and reap the tax benefit of doing so when you cash it in. It is a non-taxable event. You know, what's funny is like all these guys. I was watching a Netflix special on this guy who was a music mogul, and he had this big old record company. He sold it for $800 million. And because it was the Netflix special was about him, they made him look like a um, philanthropist. They said, "Oh, and he just did the best thing in the world. He donated all of his stock to a foundation prior to the sale, and the sale paid the foundation so he can do his philanthropy work." And I started laughing my butt off. That's what Bill Gates did right before he retired. He donated all of his stock to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all of it was tax free. Now, to obtain the MCO for an old car, so that we can remove plates and or transfer the title into the foundation. Well, you can transfer the title into the foundation, and there's people you can pay $500 to get the MSO. But the thing that I haven't figured out is how are you going to remove the element of registration um, from the state? So those are things that I don't take time with to try to figure out because it's just not worth it. I only move cars in the name of the foundation for tax benefit purposes and also for jurisdictional reasons over the vehicle itself. I'm trying to bulletproof the vehicle. I'm trying to make it so that they don't have jurisdiction over the vehicle if they were going to try to impound it. But the bottom line is, there are people you can pay. I think it's $500. You can get an MSO, and it is a duplicate. And if you look up the word duplicate in Black's Law, it's a new original. Just FYI. So I wouldn't worry about it. Personally, I just put it in the foundation and not worry about getting the MSO, especially on an older vehicle. It almost doesn't make sense because of the work you have to do with the registration element of it, which I can't answer for you because I'm not busy out there trying to figure that out. But there are people online out there that you can research about how to unregister a vehicle. I just don't know how to do it personally. We have a rental property that is in our living trust. Can we simply have the tenant sign a 12-month lease and pay the foundation, or do we need to change the property title first? Um, you, so you can contract with the, um, this is something I'd rather answer privately with you, Mark, um, because of what I have to say. But for the way to get it done properly, title change, quit claim, rental agreements in the name of the foundation, rental agreements not using the jurisdiction of the state. So you can kick these suckers that don't pay rent out on a whim. And sorry, just being real. That's, the last time here in California we went through the COVID, many of the landlords were hurt, both in New York, California, all over, because you weren't able to remove people when they stopped paying rent. And there's a lot of people that stop paying rent. I don't agree with that. So if you're operating in the private where you put the property in the name of the foundation and you have an agreement that doesn't invoke the jurisdiction of the state and it's not an MLS rental agreement, you're able to boot them out with whatever notice that you've agreed upon within the agreement and give them time to make that payment. If they don't make it, just go and change the locks and remove their stuff and put it on the street. And There is no cop that will have jurisdiction over that. They will make a presumption that they do, and make an implied threat of an arrest potentially, but then you serve the cop immediately with a copy of the contract and you help them to understand this is a private location, not a public. This is a private entity, not a public. And here's a copy of the rental agreement where they've agreed in allowing this to happen. So if the cop wants to intervene and make a presumption, he would be liable. But the bottom line is, that's what I would do. But there's more, I'm thinking, just to get you through your existing scenario that you can do with agreements between the two. Um, but I hope that helps. If one already used Uphold, would it be beneficial to start an account with Caleb and Brown? So my question to you is the Uphold account done with the foundation or a social security number? Because if it's done with the social security number, any taxable events or you're going to have a taxable event with Uphold because they're going to be, we don't know if we're going to be in a position in the future where these gains are going to be automatically reported. And 1099 is going to be automatically distributed. And so if you applied and you did it with the social security number and you didn't do it with the foundation, therefore you are going to have a taxable event. And so yes is the answer. I would go to Caleb and Brown and structure it up with the foundation. We have had an ambulance on our certified mail paperwork that is not being scanned in an abundance, an ambulance, sorry, buddy, an abundance of our certified mail paper that's not being scanned in. So there is no proof of delivery. Just go to USPS.com and print screen the delivery. That's all you have to do. The USPS is saying that the certified mail isn't what is used to be. That's true. My problem is that it is getting real expensive and timely to have to redo a bunch. So the question I have is, are they showing it not being delivered on USPS.com as well? And I know it's getting expensive, and I know that they're fighting this, and they're causing issues on certified mail. You may want to consider going private, and using a private mail service or using registered mail. But if you use FedEx or UPS, a little more costly, but you get the proof of deliveries and it's golden. When you donate crypto to the foundation, do you need any witnesses or notary? Well, I would create a paper trail and put it on a final tax return that you donated X amount of, I wouldn't even call it crypto, I'd call it cash equivalent to the crypto. And I'd say, put something on the tax return. When they ask what that was, you can show that it was in fact crypto. But the bottom line is I'd do it on a tax return is my point. The final tax return that you do. Did I just say the IRS will allow for deductions and contributions to churches that do not have 501c3 status? Yes, I did. Foundations, SSMs, private church, unincorporated, unregistered. The IRS allows deductions because it is a church. Got to remember something. Most churches in this nation did not become a 501c3 till the late 60s and still are private. I want you to think about that. That is only if the church is a PMA or similar. No, it's just as if they're private and they're a congregation and we do the docs for them. We will make sure that they have an ability to have a deduction for their parishioners. Okay, I'm gonna go over to YouTube real quick. It's 5:38, pressing on time. I have to take care of some stuff. Can we talk about the illegal immigration? Think. That's not really a question. Um, I think the illegal immigration's an invasion and a coming war. That's my personal opinion. And when I say war, I mean people that are here to put on a UN uniform and try to take over this nation. Hey, Kelby, can we establish our foundation and happen to receive funds from Social Security, et cetera, account, even though you have bad options about wouldn't it still be wise for one to use it to give back? I don't know what you're asking there. If you can ask that question again a little more clearly, my apologies. Opinions, sorry. Even though you have bad opinions about it. Um, no, I think people can use the Social Security and put it directly into the foundation account all day long. I mean, we don't tell people to not do the Social Security. We tell people to do it. Um, okay, hold on. Any other questions? People want to be free. What's up to all the people who want to be free? What's up, Thak? Can I get back my grandfather's forest in Romania? Lacko. I want to give you a big hug, dude. I don't know how to answer that, man. You can get some guns. Get some guns, Lacko. Um, hey, where can I find your schedule for these living in the private Q&As? We keep our schedule. I'm gonna go and grab it for you and put the link in. It's every other Thursday, it's every other Monday at 4 p.m. So every other Monday at 4 p.m. and then we put everything on our calendar that we're doing right here. So that you guys can grab it. But anyway, look, if you guys want to get noticed on anything, um, text the word freedom. Just go to your texting, type the word freedom, and send it to 855-452-0499. 855-452-0499. Go and register for free at hisadvocates.org. Hisadvocates.org. We send email notifications, we send text notifications on pretty much every event that we have. And these Q&As are super important, as you see that, because there's a lot of times that people, they have questions on what it means to be private. And I do my best to explain why we do what we do. And I take everything that I do is with extreme importance to be in operation and above reproach and working within the law and the construct of the law. We're just taking everything that they do against us and we're reversing it and doing the same thing on them. It's like a non-judicial foreclosure where they steal your house in the private. We're doing the same thing to them through the living in the private program. And it effectively creates a court of record that is very powerful. So we welcome anybody that has any issues, comments, concerns, anything. We've been doing this now going on our 14th year. I'm proud to say that we don't have any complaints filed. We work very hard in making sure that everybody's question gets answered and that we're operating above reproach. After establishing our foundation, we happen to receive funds from the Social Security account, even though we have bad opinions about it, will we still be wise to give it back? No, keep it, man. Spend it. You have a tax question, though, and we'll deal with the tax question on another call. God bless, man. Appreciate you guys joining, coming and hanging out with me for an hour and 45 minutes. Super important that we keep growing together, we keep learning together, and I'll see you on the next Q&A, 2 weeks, 4 p.m. Pacific. We will go live just like we did on YouTube, and we will address every question that you guys have and get every question answered. So if you're an existing living in the private or you're somebody considering it, this is the place to get it done, or call 1-800 or 844-HISADVO extension 706 or extension 704 or extension 2. Just dial 2. It'll go into a ring pattern. 844-HISADVO, 844-HISADVO, and press extension 2, and we'll address your questions. So God bless you guys.